Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of Factory Future. Family offices sit at a unique intersection of capital, complexity, and responsibility. Over the past decade, they've evolved far beyond investment organizations, now balancing reporting, governance, operations, and the challenge of creating real visibility across generations. With Factory Future, my goal is simple to have focused one on one conversations with professionals who are deeply in the work and to explore what actually holds up in practice, not just in theories or headlines. Today, I'm joined by someone who lives at the center of that complexity, Ethan Bonar, founder and CEO of CFO Family. Ethan brings nearly 3 decades of experience advising families, running a multifamily office, leading operations and compliance at LD Low Wealth Advisory, building and selling an operating company, and now leading an independent backed office reporting platform dedicated entirely to clarity and transparency. CFO Family delivers a complete, unbiased view of total net worth across entities, asset classes, and generations, and works alongside advisors to give families clarity they can actually use. Today, we're unpacking what unbiased family reporting really means, why families still struggle with visibility, and how technology, operations, and data structure play into long term resilience. Ethan, thank you for joining me.
I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Well, why don't we go ahead and jump right in? So, when you first meet a family for the first time, how do you describe what CFO Family actually does, and what problem are you there to solve?
Boy, that's an interesting question. Usually people show up with some sort of technology problem. I mean, my job day in and day out is dealing with the data and the software that gets them the information that they need. So everybody has a little different problem, and whether that is kind of performance reporting, accounting, or something in between. And there's a lot of in between in that world. That could be document retention, compliance, very esoteric needs like how do I manage my 10 properties that I have that are really only used for the family. There's lots of different needs that people come. Usually the theme is around data and where that data is and being able to get access to what they need out of that data. And so the world that I live in and day out is kind of this data world. Um, you referenced my background. So I don't necessarily come from a tech background. So my view on a family starts a little bit differently. It's more from the advisor side, although I don't do any advising at this point in my career. It is more um, focused on kind of the output of what it is that they do and don't need as it relates to the family versus here's some systems or here's the technology that you need. So that family that comes to me, we get a little different set of questions than they normally would. I'm digging into things like family structure. Then we dive into data. Where are the things that they need access to? What is it that they need to get out of all of the information that they have? What kind of reporting? And again, I try and simplify it into performance and accounting, and then kind of everything else in between. All the while staying agnostic to the systems. I don't think there's one single system out there that fits everybody. So I try to stay agnostic to that and make sure that I'm coming with a functional solution to the family versus just saying, hey, you need these pieces of software and this works.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I appreciate you kind of clarifying that. Kind of going off that, you've ran a multifamily office and an operating company and now a reporting platform. Which experience do you think most shaped how you think about serving families today?
I it's a good mix of all of them, but I mean, I spent the most time, probably 20 years owning um, owning an RIA, so doing the traditional multifamily office work. And what I was able to see within that were the limitations of data gathering and data reporting. A lot of that has to do with compliance and costs related to compliance for the SEC. When you separate from that and you're an independent family or a family office that is complex, and you have the ability to have ownership of the systems and software that drive all of this reporting, it's quite liberating. It's a different experience than having a traditional MFO running and doing the reporting and data gathering for you. And so, my MFO world, then on to, a building and operating company, and the limitations of once there's a liquidity event, for example, I lose all my staff, I lose all my systems, yet I have all of the responsibility of the assets that now are typically liquid, maybe, or are are becoming liquid. And what do I do with those? Not necessarily where do I invest them, but how do I keep track of all of them? And especially once I start deploying some of that liquidity, how do I keep track of all of that? What's the right structure and what's the right system? Um, and so all of those things have played into where we sit today. And the impetus for me creating CFO Family was to be able to give these complex families and single family offices the ability to have data ownership and data sovereignty. And there's a lot of families that don't have a fully functional back office. So they pile on work to themselves, or they pile on work to an executive assistant. And at some point, that's just too much. In addition, all the number of different softwares that are out there that can help you keep track of it is mind-boggling. And there's so much overlap between them. It's hard to determine what's right and wrong. So looking at my previous experience, I wanted to do really three things. One being be able to consult completely independent of systems and software. What is the problem? What are we trying to solve? What is going to fit and help solve that problem? Two, and that could be not necessarily replacing a system, but it could be we need to just leverage what you have better. You may have a functional system, you're just not using it appropriately. Two, implementing or onboarding, and then process creation. So let's get all the data flow organized. So I have things here and here and here. How do I get them moving, and how do I automate that? And some of that automation is AI driven automation, bot driven automation. And then third, being a fully outsourced back office for those that don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to run day in and day out the systems that are put in place. So I operate, in any of those three areas with families.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think, having um, that diverse set of backgrounds gives you a really good advantage, and lets you see things from multiple perspectives. So that's super interesting to kind of hear how each one is kind of fit into your role now. So appreciate you sharing that. And let's shift into reporting a little bit, because this is where you've really built something unique. um, from your vantage point, what does the reporting landscape actually look like today? Are most families still in spreadsheets? Is it fragmented systems, or is it, something in between?
It's a bit of all of that. There are a lot of families that are still using spreadsheets to pull everything together. And so again, I'll go back to performance reporting, accounting, and these two branches right here um, are they need different information and they spit out different information for the exact same investment, the exact same piece of property, the exact same entity. So you've got two systems that are capturing data from the same thing, but in different ways. When you get into multi-entity or multi-investment tracking, and you have a spreadsheet that's over here, you have an accounting system that's over here. Oftentimes, especially if you're using QuickBooks, you have to consolidate all that. A spreadsheet's what ends up getting used for that. If you have a performance system over here for performance, oftentimes you've got some sort of consolidated performance reporting, but it's not accounting centric and it's not accounting based. So you have some disconnects within systems like that. But a lot of people are still pulling things together on a spreadsheet and doing formulas on the back end. The ones who have jumped into, let's say, the performance reporting systems, what they find is in order to get, really robust reporting, it becomes very expensive. Not only does it become expensive, but oftentimes, you're the one running the system yourself. So you have to learn a system, you have to pay, the software cost, and then make sure you stay on top of it. So move that over to the accounting side. Usually you have a bookkeeper or somebody doing some basic entry, and you have your tax person, and you're relying on them to roll things up and then consolidate both sides to get the information you need. You have to go here, you have to go over there. If you have any of these esoteric pieces in between, especially when you come to private investments, alts, interfamily loans, things like that, now you've got a whole nother layer of complexity, and you've got scattered pieces. So I still see a lot of families that show up on my doorstep with those issues and running spreadsheets and asset value and net worth. And I see billion-dollar family offices that are still using spreadsheets to roll things up.
That's wild to think about. But yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I know you've emphasized unbiased family reporting. In practice, what does that give families that, traditional setups don't?
So because I'm not coming in as an advisor, I'm not an investment advisor, I'm not a tax advisor, I'm not a legal advisor. Those are not my primary focuses. Whereas if I'm an MFO, my primary focus is asset gathering and asset management. That's how I typically bill and make money. If I'm a tax advisor, it's tax planning and tax direction is primary. Reporting comes secondary behind that. Same thing with legal. And so what I'm providing families is the ability to have the reporting come first and be completely independent of all of those sources that they can then in turn share out with those advisors. And now they have a ownership of their information, their data. They can put in excellent advisors where they want to put them, and they can terminate the ones that aren't and still retain and maintain their information and data. So it gives them a freedom and a flexibility of what a giant single family office would have without having all of the staff, without having all of the headaches related to having and keeping track of a giant single family office.
Definitely, yeah. That gives you, a big advantage and a lot of flexibility, which is something I've seen, family offices really value. So I think that's terrific. And kind of going off that, where do you see the biggest, visibility gaps, even among, sophisticated families?
Usually it's around liquidity. What the liquidity needs are, where their liquidity is. Um, Usually that ends up being the biggest gap area is where is my cash? How much cash do I have? How much cash am I going to have? How much cash do I need to have on hand when I've committed X dollars? Am I going to have enough liquidity to cover all of that? So liquidity typically becomes a number one on average with a lot of these families. Behind that, it varies dramatically depending on how they're structured and where their investments are. If they're more heavily weighted in privates and alts, then they have a different set of needs and complexities versus if they're heavily weighted in publics and they're trading actively. Those are two different animals. Even if they're the same size, even if they have the same number of family members, they're completely different animals. And so when I go back to being unbiased and agnostic to the software, if I have just a structured setup that says these are the softwares you need to use, and that works for the family that's public heavy, that's probably not going to work for the family that's private heavy and alt heavy. And so you can see when you get into this rigid, this is the structure, there are little nuances that don't apply. And so the families need a bit more bespoke build out to solve what their problem really is, and you have to get down to it to understand it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a great answer, and it's something that, I hear very often is, every family is different, and it is very true. Every single one I've kind of talked to is, has different values and different beliefs and kind of, different investment strategies. So, having the ability to tailor to each one, I think is super important. So I appreciate that. And that does kind of lead us right into the technology piece, especially, I wanted to talk on migrations and AI a little bit. So, you've been vocal about onboarding and migrations. What do families get most wrong when, they decide to switch reporting systems?
They usually think that they've got maybe the data, they have all the data, and we just put this data into the new system. And usually it's way more complex than that. Um, Different systems have different attributes that they track. So I did one just recently where it was a switch from PWS, private wealth systems, over to a Sora, which is both performance systems. PWS is more accounting centric than a Sora. Sora is more performance based. So the metrics in an accounting system and the attributes within an accounting system are a bit deeper. And so moving that data over and figuring out where to put it into a performance system is problem number one. I've got more data than I really need. What am I going to do with it? I don't want to just scrap it. I have important information in here, but where do I put it? And so if you don't get it put in the right spot and you don't think through the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months of how you're going to be using a system, then you might put it in the wrong place, and then you have to go back and fix those problems. So spending probably more time than you would want to spend up front, making sure the data is clean and is going to be movable and will move clean, is critical in all of this. So rushing into getting the new system up and running is usually a big issue. You have to hold the range. The more time you spend up front, the less time you're going to have to spend on the back end fixing things.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely makes sense. And uh, kind of jumping into, AI a little bit, where would you say AI genuinely useful for reporting today? And where do you think people are, overestimating what it can do? if there is an area.
So, pretty standard questions like, what are the top three investments with IRR? Um, if you can create a dashboard for it to see a metric, then AI can answer that question for you without you having to have a dashboard. Um, what kind of where it's going, that's a whole nother animal. And I'll save that maybe for a little bit later on in this conversation. But the idea that you can just stick AI in something and it's going to give you responses that are acceptable is a big problem, because oftentimes the data is not as clean as you think it is. And if you think about it, if you unleash an AI agent within a system that doesn't have fully clean data, it's going to give you incorrect answers, and it's going to give you more incorrect answers faster than a human would. So not necessarily worse, but faster. So you get bombarded. You ask it a question, and it spits an incorrect answer out to you, and you may not know it's incorrect. But again, the importance of getting the data clean. So before ever putting at like an AI assistant on to help you parse through your data, you want an AI agent to help you clean it. Starting with that and making sure it's clean is the critical step when dealing with these AI systems and AI agents. And I can tell you numerous systems out there that have released their AI help bot AI agent that all of a sudden begins to hallucinate, and it's not necessarily because the agent is bad. It's because the data in that person's system is messed up, and it's not clean.
That's super interesting, and you got me curious now. I think it is, before we kind of jump into governance a little bit, I think it's a decent time. Where do you think AI is going? I know you kind of mentioned um, that earlier. I'd love to, kind of hear your perspective on where you think things are headed.
I think that more and more, and I'm going to call them help bots within the system, or they're going to learn and be very, very not deeply knowledgeable within a specific system. So if you're using a specific performance reporting system, the AI agents within that system are going to get very deep and robust, and they're going to be able to answer questions for you, and they're going to be able to create charts and graphs for you. They're going to be able to do really functional things for you within the confines of that system. And so that's what we're seeing and what we're going to see more and more of, which is going to make them more useful. But again, if your data is not clean, then you still have the same problem. Now, the hope and the expectation is that those agents are going to become smart enough, those help bots within the system are going to become smart enough to be able to know that there's a problem, or recognize and learn that there's a problem with the data cleanliness, and alert you to it. So I expect that we'll see some of that coming down the line here pretty soon. Um, when it gets to outside of the system, so just in general, I mean, you may see, if you use a CRM system, or if you use any kind of outside system that helps you respond to emails, for example, or track tasks. Those things are outside of a performance reporting system. They're outside of an accounting system. They're outside of these systems that are helping you keep organized, and they don't have connections within those systems. So what we're going to see is the ability for those connections to happen. I'm building something out for families right now. As a matter of fact, it's a bespoke kind of solution, for lack of better terms, we'll call it a mission control system that will be able to pull the performance data and analyze it, pull the accounting data and analyze it and roll it up, pull the compliance and document retention systems and data and analyze all of that. So I give the example of if you're a family and you look and you see my net worth went down last month. Why? Why did my net worth go down? Um, you go to the performance system and you look, and the performance system says you went down because a market went down, your publics went down, your privates were revalued at this, so you had value go down. Your accounting system is going to say, well, you had cash outflows of this and you didn't have enough inflows, so your value went down. And both answers are correct, but independently, they're not fully correct. The answer is the sum of all of those and probably more. So you asking a person, an assistant or a CFO or somebody like that, that question, they're going to go to this system, they're going to go to that system, they're going to go over here, they're going to pull all this together and get an answer. What I've built is that it will be able to go do all of those things and pull and get that answer and give you a holistic functional answer. That's the future, and that's where we're going in the near term.
Yeah,
Past past I think the next 24 months, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just holding on tight for the roller coaster ride.
yeah, I think that what you're building sounds extremely helpful for the family office community, and yeah, that's fascinating to hear, and um, yeah, I'm excited to kind of follow along and see how things progress. Kind of, technology is one side of it, but governance is where it all shows up. Let's kind of shift there. Um, how does having independent reporting change the relationship between families and their advisors?
It puts the control in their hands, and so I'll give the example of a full single family office versus just an ultra high net worth complex family. Okay. And the defining the real difference between the two is one is fully formed with a full staff and usually a full C-suite, single family office. The other is loosely pulled together. And sometimes the C-suite is the patriarch matriarch. Sometimes they might have a single C in there, or they might have an assistant, or they might not have any of that. So in my theory, to get to single family office functionality, you have to have control and ownership of your data. And so that gives you complete control to hire and fire. When that single family office has a CIO investment person that's not doing their job or not being as functional, they fire them. And when they fire them, they don't lose all of their data. They don't lose their systems. They don't lose the rest of their staff. But a complex family that maybe uses an MFO, if they that's handling all those, if the investment side is not doing well, but all the other pieces are doing well, they can't just fire the CIO. They have to fire the entire MFO. Now you lose your reporting, you lose your data, you lose your history, your staff, all of those things. So what it does is it gives the control back to the families to be able to say, okay, I'm going to put an excellent advisor here, and I'm going to share my data with that excellent advisor so they can do their job. And if they're not doing their job, I still have the data, and I'll see you later, advisor. And so that control stays with the family. It's very important in my mind for that control to stay with the family. In addition, that plays into things like family governance. Again, when you have control of your data and your systems, then you can put those excellent people and excellent advisors in the place that fit.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I didn't know that that was the case, and yeah, that makes sense. When you're thinking in terms of decades, having all that data is so important. And all this ultimately shapes the next generation. Kind of when we talk about in terms of decade. So I wanted to hit one question on next gen readiness. Um, how can great reporting support next gen readiness and help younger family members actually understand what they're inheriting?
So, excellent question, and I'll answer that from a kind of a systems overview. It's interesting that piece of a system is its kind of own standalone piece, and you can call it a document retention system, at its bare bones, but it's something that needs to be more complex than that, where things are organized, where actions can happen, documents and information can be shared quickly and easily. Um, with those things organized, then there's clarity for the next gen and the advisors as it relates to what's going to happen, whether that's a legal advisor or a state advisor or a tax advisor. So just in general, having some of those things organized is of value. And if you can pull together all of those pieces, um, from performance monitoring, which matches with your investment policy statement, which is part of the family governance, over to the tax and accounting, and allowing the tax advisors to be really functional and do their work again as it relates back to family governance and direction. Now you've got all of these things tied back together, and again, I'm simplifying this a little bit, but tied back together so that it's easy to understand for the next gen on what is the purpose, what is our direction, what is the intent of all of this, versus it kind of being this loose, dad or mom is doing this and they're going to teach me some things.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. And, those kind of things go a long way. So appreciate you sharing that. And, one thing that I've kind of noticed in this space, I just kind of wanted to hear what your thoughts on, um, is kind of the importance of different perspectives. How important do you think it is diversity of thought when you're building and reporting financial function of a family office?
Well, what do you mean by diversity of thought? Give me a little detail on that.
So one thing I've kind of noticed when it comes to, especially single family offices is a lot of the times they hire people from similar backgrounds or even, maybe they attended the same school and kind of have similar thought patterns. So I don't know. I think it is important to, have people who think differently than you, to kind of, see things from a different perspective um,
I
and
agree. I agree with you, and I understand where you're coming from. The to go back to the ability for you to control your data and your information makes it so much easier for you to interact with others that might be outside of your typical group or typical thought process. You can, if you've got control of your data and information, you can share the pieces that you want somebody to comment on or give you direction or give you their opinion on much easier than if you have to go ask somebody else for that information or try and pull together 4 or 5 other sources and then share it out. So it goes back to control, uh, which gives you the ability to do it easier, and therefore, in theory, would kind of drive you a little bit more to be able to do that. And coming into next gen, that's extremely important because usually there is some variance in thought and ideal. Although it may be very closely aligned, there's always going to be a little bit of variance in there. And so the more control of that information you have and the ability to share it with others when it's appropriate to share it with others, um, means you're more likely to do so.
Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing your perspective. And that kind of brings us out to our closeout. And I've got a few reflective rapid fire questions. So this is kind of my signature. So what I'll do is I'll kind of ask question and then you answer with either like one word or one sentence, and then I'll go to the next one, and then I'll go ahead and close this out. Before we get into the the reflective rapid fire, is there anything else that you wanted to kind of address or talk about?
I think family governance is one of the most important things as it relates to all of this in getting to single family offices. I know plenty of full single family offices who don't visit this enough, but even more complex families that don't focus on that topic. And a lot of times it's because they don't have easy access to their own data, and therefore it seems an arduous task to get it all together and to think about it. That is one of the most critical pieces, and I believe that probably your next, if you haven't focused on it, I think that needs to continue to be a focus within your podcasts, because families must focus on that ideal and governance. And don't get bogged down by the word governance. It's more of expression of um, what your ideas, why you're doing this, what you want your legacy to be, what you want your family to do. Again, that piece of it is, I think, a very, very critical piece.
100%. And yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And it's definitely a topic that I want to, dive more into. So I appreciate you kind of sharing your perspective on that. And is there anything else before or
Nope, let's do it.
awesome? So here's our reflective rapid fire. So for the first one, it's one trend in family offices that excites you the most.
The AI utilization.
Awesome. Next one is one misconceptions or misconception about family reporting or family offices that most like to correct, that you would most like to correct. Sorry.
Um, that that one system or structure fits most everybody.
It's a good answer. And last one is one habit every family enterprise should adopt around data or decision making.
Um, Making sure that the data in is as clean as it can be, and that process is as automated as it can be.
Awesome. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for bringing such a clear, grounded perspective on what it really takes, giving families visibility, clarity, and confidence, especially in areas that never show up on the balance sheet. It's obvious that you've spent years sitting at the intersection of families, advisors, data, and operations, and I really appreciate you sharing it here today. This has been Factory Future. I'm Colten Ratz, and the goal of this series is to surface real world insights from people doing the work behind the scenes in the family office ecosystem. If you found this conversation valuable, feel free to share it with someone in your network and subscribe so you never miss a future episode. Ethan, thank you again. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to continuing the conversation soon.
Thank you, Colton. Appreciate it greatly.
See you guys.